The 4-0 Italico rose to its feet, not to cheer, to pray. One moment, Alex Eala was gliding across the clay, chasing down a drop shot that few players could even reach. The next moment, she was on the ground, her face buried in her hands, her racket lying several feet away, and the worst kind of silence falling over 3,500 people. She had survived the OVA curse. She had silenced the critics. She had just beaten a higher-ranked opponent and climbed back to number 38. And then, in a split second, everything changed. The medical team sprinted, her coaches froze, and the Italian Open held its breath. Rome, Italy. May 9, 2026. The Foro Italico's Pietrangeli Court. And a moment that no one saw coming. Let me set the scene for you. The third-round match against Elena Rabaccana had been everything the Italian Open hoped for and more. The world number 2, the 2022 Wimbledon champion, had arrived in Rome as one of the favorites. Her power game was perfectly suited to clay, and her serve had been nearly untouchable throughout the tournament. Standing across the net was Alex Eala, the 20-year-old Filipina who had already stunned the tennis world by reaching the third round of a WTA 1000 clay event for the first time in her career. The first set had been a masterclass from Rabaccana. Her ground strokes were precise, her movement sharp, her confidence high. Eala, who had spent over 2 hours on court against Magdalena Frey and another 86 minutes battling number 31 seed Wang Xinyu, looked fatigued. But she was not beaten. In the second set, something clicked. Eala's movement, which had looked heavy in the first set, suddenly became light. Her returns, which had been landing short, began finding depth. She broke Rabaccana's serve, not once, but twice, and took the set 6-3. The Foro Italica was on its feet. The Philippine flags that had filled the intimate Pietrangeli court were waving in desperate, synchronized waves. The chants of Laban Alex echoed off the clay. The impossible was becoming possible. The third set began. Rabaccana struck first, breaking Eala's serve in the third game to take a 2-1 lead. But Eala, who had overcome deficits against Frek and Wang, fought back. She broke Rabaccana in the sixth game, 3-3. Then came the shot that changed everything. Rabaccana unleashed a drop shot that seemed destined to end the point. Eala, sprinting from the baseline, somehow reached the ball. She stretched, her racket barely making contact, and flicked it back over the net. The ball landed just inside the line. But Eala did not get up. She landed awkwardly on her left ankle, the same ankle that had been bothering her since the beginning of the clay season. The pain was immediate. She collapsed onto the clay, her face buried in her hands. Racket lying several feet away. The Foro Italico, which had been roaring just seconds earlier, fell silent. The Pietrangeli court had never been so quiet. 3,500 people held their breath, and Alex Eala lay motionless on the clay. Let me walk you through the moments that followed the injury, because the silence was louder than any roar the Foro Italico had ever produced. The medical team sprinted across the court. The tournament supervisor was summoned. Her coaches, Joan Bosch, Luc Bausa, and Sandro Vianney, rushed to the baseline, their faces masks of controlled concern. Her mother, Riza, who had been watching from the stands, pressed her hands together as if in prayer. Eala did not move. Her face was still buried in her hands. Her ankle, already beginning to swell, was angled in a way that made trainers wince. It's her left ankle, a courtside reporter confirmed. The same ankle she's been managing throughout the clay season. The medical team worked quickly. They immobilized the ankle. They helped Eala to her feet. She tried to put weight on it and immediately grimaced. The crowd, which had been silent, let out a collective gasp. Rabaccana stood at the net, waiting. The Kazakh, who had been battling Eala point for point, looked genuinely concerned. She had seen this before. The sudden twist, the silent fall, the slow walk to the net. It was not how anyone wanted to win. Eala spoke to the umpire. Her words were not captured by the microphones. But her body language told the story. She could not continue. The retirement was official. The match was over. And the Italian Open had lost one of its brightest stars. The retirement was official. The match was over. But the real battle was just beginning. Let me walk you through the moments after Alex Eala withdrew from the Italian Open, because the injury was not just a physical blow. It was an emotional earthquake. The Pietrangeli court had fallen into a stunned silence. The Philippine flags, which had been waving in desperate synchronized waves just moments earlier, were now motionless. The chants of Laban Alex had faded into whispers. And Alex Eala, the 20-year-old who had fought through rain delays, 3-set battles, and the weight of a nation's expectations, was being helped off the court by the medical team. She could not put weight on her left ankle. Her face was pale. Her eyes were fixed on the clay, not in defeat, but in disbelief. This was not how it was supposed to end. The Italian Open had been her breakout tournament on clay. She had defeated Magdalena Frake in a rain-soaked 3-set battle, saving 6 of 9 breakpoints and overcoming a 3-1 deficit in the final set. She had stunned number 31 seed Wang Xinu in straight sets, avenging her heartbreaking loss in Auckland. Her ranking had climbed back to number 38 with 1,310 points. She was 1 set away from the biggest victory of her clay season, against the world number 2 no less. And then, in a split second, everything changed. Elena Rybakina, the 2022 Wimbledon champion, stood at the net, waiting. The Kazakh, who had been battling Eala point for point, looked genuinely concerned. She had seen this before. The sudden twist, the silent fall, the slow walk to the net. It was not how anyone wanted to win. The two players exchanged a brief embrace. Professional, respectful but brief. Rybakina walked off the court, advancing to the quarterfinals. Eala limped off the court, her tournament over. The Foro Italico rose to its feet, not to cheer, to applaud. The ovation was not for the winner. It was for the fighter who had refused to give up until her body finally said no. The Foro Italico rose to its feet, not to cheer, to applaud. And the ovation that followed was unlike anything Rome had heard all tournament. Let me walk you through the moments after Alex Eala withdrew from her third-round match against Elena Rybakina, because what happened next revealed more about the Filipina's character than any victory ever could. The medical team had done their work. The ankle was wrapped, the tournament supervisor had been notified, the official announcement was made. Eala retired from the match, and Rybakina advanced to the quarterfinals. But Eala could not walk off the court alone. The pain was too intense. The ankle, already beginning to swell, would not support her weight. Her coaches, Joan Bosch, Luc Boza, and Sandro Vianney, rushed to her side. With one coach on each side of her shoulder, they helped her hobble toward the players' tunnel. The Foro Italico, which had been roaring just minutes earlier, fell into a reverent silence. Then, slowly at first, the applause began. It started in the front rows, near where the Philippine flags had been waving since the first point of the match. Then it spread, to the wings, to the upper sections, to the standing room areas where fans had packed in hours earlier just for a glimpse of their hero. Within seconds, the entire Pietrangeli court was on its feet. The ovation was not the wild, frenzied celebration of a victory. It was something deeper. Respect. For a 20-year-old who had fought through rain delays, 3-set battles, and the weight of a nation's expectations, who had never stopped believing, even when her body finally said no. Eala looked up at the stands. Her eyes glistened. She raised her hand, not in celebration, but in acknowledgement. A small wave that said, "I see you. Thank you." The crowd roared one last time, "Laban Alex. Laban Alex." The chant echoed through the quiet Roman evening, long after she had disappeared into the tunnel. The Italian Open was over. But for 110 million Filipinos, the waiting had just begun. Let me take you inside the hours after Alex Eala limped off the Pietrangeli court, because the injury that ended her Rome campaign would soon become a national vigil. The medical room at the Foro Italico was quiet, too quiet. Eala lay on the examination table, her left ankle already wrapped in ice. Her face pale from pain that the initial treatment couldn't mask. Her coaches, Joan Bosch, Luc Boza, and Sandro Vianney, stood in the corner, speaking in hushed tones. Her mother, Ritza, held her hand. The tournament doctor examined the ankle. He rotated it gently. Eala winced. He pressed on the swelling. She gasped. "We need to send her for an MRI," the doctor said. "We can't be sure of the extent of the damage without it." The words hung in the air like a storm cloud. "Can't be sure." That was the phrase that nobody wanted to hear. Outside the Foro Italico, the news was already spreading. The Philippine flags that had been waving in celebration just hours earlier were now being folded and tucked into bags. The chants of Laban Alex had faded into anxious whispers. And across Manila, in Cebu, in Davao, in every Filipino community around the world, millions of people were refreshing their phones, searching for updates, waiting for answers. The question on everyone's lips was the same. How bad was it? She landed awkwardly on her left ankle, the same ankle she's been managing throughout the clay season, a courtside reporter had confirmed earlier. That detail made everything worse. The left ankle had been a concern since the beginning of the clay swing. Eala had mentioned it in passing during interviews. A little niggle, she called it. Nothing serious. But those who watched her closely had noticed. The way she favored her right foot during changeovers. The way she sometimes limped between points when she thought no one was looking. The pain had been manifested.